Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, and good night, and welcome to Freeformers Unplugged, episode 4. Just going to tighten that bad boy up. Emily, how you doing?
I'm good. I haven't properly lined myself up in the frame because sneak peek under the hood. Toby was here with about 3 seconds to go.
Literally
Uh,
slid in through the door, so much so that my hair is off the screen. That's
Look at
how
that.
unprepared we are. Look at that. Let's fix that a little bit. Hey, there we go. And now my pictures are
But
wonky as well.
apart from that, I am all good. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. I think I've got a cold.
Oh no,
We
you're
went from
kidding me.
flu to you. Now I think I've got a cold. I think it is the season to be ill, and I think maybe a lot of people out there in Listerland are probably feeling a little bit ill as well. I think it's just going round, right?
Time of year.
Are you fit? Are you healthy? Are you
Yeah,
alive?
yeah, much better. Still got the remnants just hanging on from last week, but much better and raring to go.
Cool. So this week's topic is psychometric tests, the HR horoscope. We pretend, or some people pretend, is science.
Let's start by what we're talking about. What are we talking about by
uh,
psychometric tests?
well, okay, because I think we like it's like the. I always start from Myers Briggs. Myers Briggs is my go-to point, just because I've read the Myers Briggs book. What's your type? And uncovered the book uncovers how that came about, and you're just like, wow, this is built on absolutely nothing other than essentially parenthood is what it's built on, and understanding parenthood and raising children. But I always start with Myers-Briggs as the go-to example. But I think there's a proliferation of different similar mechanics out there that do a lot of similar things, right? We've got insights discovery, tetramap, GC index, we've got motivational maps, we've got heart styles. I had one called all these different methodologies of surveying people and giving them back a profile, right? Is
Yeah,
that your understanding of what we're talking about as well?
there's that side of it. Kind of, we could loosely group them as personality types, or personality tests, even.
Mhm.
And then we also included in psychometric testing is kind of those aptitude tests. I don't know if you've ever had to do one for a job interview where you think you're through and you think you've done fine, and then someone's lands a big non-verbal reasoning test metaphorically on your desk, and you're like, what is this? If I don't understand these shapes, am I not going to get my job because of this? So there's aptitude testing as well.
I'd not even considered talking about aptitude testing, but should we tackle them one by one? Can we
Yeah,
tackle them? I don't think
we can.
they're not really comparable, right? Or are they?
They're not really comparable, other than they fit in the same buckets. Spoiler alert: one lot is a little bit more scientific than the other. So I think we also, for the sake of, I mean, not even necessarily balance, but just information, I think have to say why some people rate psychometric tests. I think we should say that before we can move on
Sorry.
to what I know Toby thinks.
Well, I was laughing at Daddy's comment because he said this is such a Pisces thing to say.
What star sign are you?
Uh,
Cancer? Leo?
no, Beth's a Cancer. My wife is a Cancer. I'm Leo.
Oh, you're a Leo. Yeah. Okay. I am a Virgo, although right on the cusp between Virgo and Libra. So
And already you've
I don't
started
know what
using
that means.
language that completely alienates me and maybe the audience. In chat, what's your star sign? Put your star sign in chat. Danny, you've started something now. Ken's joining us as well. What about if we don't have a personality? Well, Ken, I think that says more about you than it does us, my friend.
Well, I think it says more about a personality test if it can't diagnose you with a personality. But let's get into it in a second.
Okay, so psychometric personality profiling, all this kind of stuff. Shall I just say why? Because I came up with a topic, right? I came up with it, and then I was like, "Should we say that? Talk about this?" And you said, "Hell yes." I have a problem. I have a big problem in that it's such a waste of time.
Okay.
I
Say
believe
it
it.
like you mean it.
I have done every single one. I've been in organizations. I've had to do them, and they tend to be this kind of one single moment in time that you then never revisit. So all the ones I just mentioned I've done. I have been part of them. I've been assessed on them and all that kind of stuff. And I know apparently I know way more about myself than I ever did. I think the word horoscope is in there because one of the things that you say is that it validates what's already in your mind anyway, rather than necessarily uncovering anything new. But the whole process, right? We've talked about how much we hate surveys before. It's like you do a survey, regardless of whether it's powered by science or not, Myers-Briggs or otherwise, you do a survey, you then get a PDF that's about 60 pages long detailing how amazing this methodology is and which color you are or which hat you're wearing or which element you are or whatever. And then it's like, okay, this is how you might interact with people who have different colors or different elements or different styles. And this is how you might change in these environments. And then for me personally, every time I've had one of those reports, I've had a really interesting conversation with a coach about it and then done nothing about it. There is one exception to the rule in my experience, and that is when I worked at O2 Telefonica, where they used the methodology Tetramap, and as part of the induction, every single person did it when they came through the door. And it then became like a real internal language about how people identify and interact with other people. Like it was baked in, it was scary, it was like it was part of a cult. Until I did my Tetramap analysis, diagnosis, whatever, I felt like I was an outsider looking into everyone else having these conversations, and it was truly baked in. So in that instance, I think it's fairly useful. And then one more point, and I'll stop my rant. But as we know, there's 2 points actually, because why not? A, it's a single moment in time, and we know data is valuable and analysis is valuable when you measure that over time. So if you only measure at one point in time, that's kind of pointless. I'd rather understand the movement against those metrics. And then the second one is that you are farming behavioral data by asking people about how they behave, rather than truly spending the time and effort to understand the data ecosystem within that organization and measuring how people actually behave. But that's because technology has evolved to enable us to do that. Facebook, Instagram, whatever, any social media channel essentially evaluates human behavior and defines it through observing human behavior through interaction with that platform. Now, there's going to be, I can see already what you're going to say in terms of the Big Brother methodology, but maybe there's a halfway house between the two. Respond to any of those.
Why I'm laughing is I'm like, Toby, you've literally just covered the whole live stream in the first 8 minutes, and some of that we were chatting about why we're ill and what our horoscopes are. You like covered every single point at breakneck speed for everybody. Okay, so the first thing that you said is about how it's used afterwards, and I think this echoes Danny's comment about as they say, the beauty of psychometrics is not about the label, it's about the conversation afterwards. And Marcy is asking why you haven't had a conversation, why you haven't done anything after your conversation afterwards.
Laziness, arrogance.
Okay.
I don't disagree. I call myself arrogant. You just, yeah, that story checks out. No, can I
you may.
Because it's not like systematically entrenched in the workplaces that I worked in, and that's where, like I say, with the O2 stuff, it was genuinely actually quite useful to have this shortcut. I did some work with a large consultancy firm who've designed their own, and they started on this journey to kind of make it part of the organizational language. But there were a lot of people who had done it and a lot of people that hadn't. The variance there is that at O2, literally everybody had done it. Like I couldn't find someone who hadn't done it unless it was like their first day. So I think that's my answer. But
yeah, so being embedded in. So I think that's something that's very important to take into account when you're thinking about doing psychometric testing, is how you're going to use it and how you're going to keep using it. I was worried after having initially jumped at this topic, being like, have I just got a lot of bias and preconceived notions, because I know you have, that we're just going to flood this conversation with without actually taking a more nuanced approach? So I did some preparation for this one. I actually did. I listened to a podcast with a proponent and I read about 6 papers, actual scientific papers about this.
not blogs.
Topic. No, actual scientific papers, not all peer reviewed, but all published by universities. Because I thought otherwise, it's just going to be us on a soapbox.
Well, and to I know Paula might not be on the live stream because I think she's in London right now with her her new hire, which is very exciting. But she pointed us in the direction in the comments. If you're watching, scroll up to the comments. I think it's the very first thing there that Paula kind of pointed us in the direction of this. Oh, what's it called? The British Psychological Society. I can't find it. But like there is like this. So there is some sort of governance here about like good ones and then other ones that aren't certified, essentially.
Yeah, and there are standards, and those, yeah, it's really important. But anyway, so I read one paper, which was very much looking at the validity of it. So when we talk about validity, we're talking about how accurate is the result, as opposed to reliability, which is slightly different, which is if you were going to repeat the thing again, are you going to get the same results? So it's a slightly different version, two slightly different things. But this paper was looking at validity and basically came up with two really useful questions. They were like, it doesn't really matter how you define valid, which was the whole point of it, because academics, but like, am I measuring what I want to measure, and is my measure useful? And then what am I doing with my measure was like the third point afterwards. And I think that like sometimes you're like, this is just common sense, but there's just this big flashy thing that everyone has convinced themselves that they should do without ever actually taking that kind of step back and thinking, why are we doing this? Why is it useful? And what are we going to do with it afterwards?
I think, yeah, mirroring what Marcia said as well, right, and Danny, is that what do you do with it afterwards? And I think there's too many, and I will levy the same criticism at pulse surveys as well, is that you are capturing what people think and feel, and then nothing happens with it because the reports are relatively arbitrary. Like every report that's ever been spat out from any of these is like the first 40 pages are exactly the same regardless of who you are. So there's a lack of specificity there until you get to the meat. So I think it's, in the nicest possible way, productization has created actually quite a lazy like a lazy output, in that it feels like it might be good, but I don't really care about the generic stuff. I care about the stuff that's applicable to me because I'm extremely self-centered as well as arrogant.
I mean, most people care about what's in it for them. Like, I mean, whenever you do design anything, you're always like, what's in it for me, for the user? What's the user need? Doesn't matter how you define it. Like, what does the person need at this point? At this point in time. So I think that's totally normal. And I agree with you that productization has made this harder to ascertain good ones from questionable ones. And it's quite hard to maybe make a judgment call. Everyone's like, oh, backed by science, but anybody can say that. And yes, there might be standards authorities. And I mean, you want to go to a preferred supplier from that, but still anybody can kind of say that kind of thing. Something that was really interesting that I wanted to say, with taking a pause for a breath, was I did read one fascinating paper, which I haven't got linked, but I can link, which basically was like, why are there so many more psychometric tests these days? And they had like multiple hypotheses that they were looking to prove, like stuff like it is better to sorry, I'm only getting half the comments, I think, which is really strange. I don't understand this software. I'm only getting Danny and Marcia, nobody else. And anyway, so to go back to this paper, yeah, why? So they had these kind of things like it actually proves something, or it's better, or they're useful, and ultimately, and they did it through interviews with 53 organisations, so not massive, but not tiny. And I'm going to read this, but they had three reasons why there are more psychometric tests proved. Number one, the increase in test use was because changes in the commercial or public environment in which the organization found itself. So the tests aren't any different, but people think the information is more useful. It was largely a defensive strategy adopted in response to regulation and legislation. And number three, my personal favorite, the increased test use was in a large part a response to internal changes in organizations, particularly the growth of formalized human resources policies. And as far as I can tell, that is three reasons that basically says these things exist because we think they ought to exist rather than they have any purpose.
That's really interesting. And I just want to do some live tech solving for you, Emily. What I would do is, in another window, is if you open up LinkedIn and have the live stream running in a different window, and mute it, crucially, because otherwise you'll get a headache. That's the best way to see the comments, I would say. Ken comes in with a comment and kind of agrees with you here, I think, with some of those points, right? So all the university professors writing those papers, creating the methodologies, they might have enough understanding to be able to use these, but how would a run-of-the-mill person organization use them? So how are these? If you're blue-green, how does that change my behavior towards you if I'm trying to hit a deadline or a KPI? It also comes back and says he's not anti-academic. I didn't think you were, Ken. Don't worry. Like, that didn't come across as anti-academic. I think I am, and I was trying to reflect on my own biases as I was drastically late to the studio. Was that I might be anti-academic. I think that might be my bias, but who knows?
I don't think you're anti-academic, because you say your whole thing is this is all made up and is absolute rubbish. Like your whole thing about MBTI, which by the way has been proved and is proved, and everybody knows, and not everybody, that's the problem. A lot of people know that it is an absolute
hogwash.
Hogwash, that's a great word. Hogwash. Whereas some of the others are a little bit more, there's a little bit more actual reality to it rather than the whole horoscope type thing.
Yeah, I mean, the Myers-Briggs thing, if no one's read the book, What's Your Type? It's not that long, but it's just fascinating in just the whole background of Myers-Briggs, a multi-million-pound organization, and what it's genuinely built on. I won't spoil it, but I kind of gave the tease at the beginning. It's literally built on, I have a child and I want to evaluate their behavior as they grow up. I'm going to write a lot about what their behavior was like when they grow up. This one child who then grew up to be I can't remember if they ended up being Brig or Myers. I can't remember. I think it's Brig is the latter. So the daughter marries and becomes Brig, and the mum and daughter then start evaluating human behavior. It's nuts. Like 100 years ago that happened, and now it's so. Maybe that's what we're parents, right? Maybe we should start, documenting our child's behavior and creating a psychometric tool out of it.
Well, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on Myers-Briggs because I think there is some validity in others, but like I can't look at my two kids and she only had one. I can't look at one of my children.
She actually had two. One of them.
Okay.
One of them died quite early on.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry.
Because but she had she had the second one. She started out with the same intent that she's going to evaluate the behavior of the second one as well. She started on that journey. I think, okay, let's leave Myers-Briggs to one side then, because it's like ubiquitously we're all in agreement that Myers-Briggs is hogwash.
It's the horoscope. It's a horoscope because you just see what you want to see. I took it last night, or I took the free version last night, the 16 personalities. I've got my third different personality type within the last 2 years. So
fantastic. Sorry, Ken just said Christmas must have been fun in that house.
I know.
Here's a Christmas present. Let me see how you react. Oh, you're a TFNJ.
She did it. Her daughter got married, and the version I read, which wasn't in the book, which might be wrong, was that the mother didn't understand the son-in-law or the fiance, and did a lot of this because she wanted to basically approve of her daughter's choice. Now, I don't know if that's true or not.
There's a million and one stand-up comedians from the 80s and 70s making mother-in-law jokes on the
I know.
right now.
Anyway.
So okay, Myers-Briggs, that's gone.
Mm.
What are the good ones?
The big five personality type. We're talking personality. The big five is the one that gets touted a lot, saying that we fit into 5 different personality types, and there is allegedly, apparently, a lot of evidence that the conscientiousness one has a lot of connection with how you're likely to perform at work. So there is a correlation between that one. Other ones are a little bit more nebulous and wobbly. There's a lot of critique of that one, though, again, saying that it's very reductionist. And I think this is what Danny said, right? How many different ways do we need to say everyone's a bit different? Well, actually, a personality type's trying not to say you're a bit different. They're trying to shoehorn you into a box, saying you're one of these 5, or you're one of these 16, or you're one of these 24 different types of personalities. And they're all going to be a bit reductionist because guess what? People are complicated.
Do you know my favorite psychometric personality profiling tool? BuzzFeed, I think.
I said this last night. I was chatting to Pete, my husband, about this last night, and I was like, well, I think it's just got as much validity as what flavour ice cream should I be?
I'm Chewbacca. Which Star Wars character? I'm Chewbacca. I'm also apparently in Hufflepuff, which I
can see.
I can see.
Yeah, you're Hufflepuff.
But the weird thing is, if you drop in a psychometric personality profile test to an organization that to Ken's point, is academically thorough and references colors or whatever, right? And then you drop in Harry Potter houses as the way of doing it. Which one's going to inspire more conversation across the organization? Based on being a millennial, I would say that the Harry Potter houses are probably going
I
to
think
inspire more
it depends on
conversation.
the age range of your organization. I
I'm
believe
not
Harry
being
Potter's not as common with Gen Z.
I'm not being rude. Okay, I was going to go the other direction. I'm not being rude, but Ken is older than us, as is Marcia. Danny, I'm not sure. Does Harry Potter houses and your alignment to those resonate with you? But then, if there is any younger folks listening, I sound so old. Like, if there are any Gen Z listening, does Harry Potter? But there must be like a replacement for it, right? There'd be the next thing, like surely.
Yeah,
So,
probably.
what's the next
Don't
Harry
ask
Potter?
me.
What's
Don't ask me, Toby. I'm not a
yeah,
popular
that's a
culture
good point. I am
person.
asking completely the wrong person. So yeah, so BuzzFeed is my favorite one, but go back to what we're saying is like what is the output that it's got to inspire a conversation, not just with you and yourself and a coach potentially, but the wider organization. So the design of and go back to Ken's point, the design of that can't be just about academic rigor. It has to have academic rigor, I think, because otherwise what's the point? But also it has to be designed in an engaging way that makes me go, oh, I want to talk about this.
Well,
And
real
I'll be
world application.
well, that's just good product / customer / employee experience design, right? Is that like if you are only doing the first half of the design by doing the academic research and rigor to figure this stuff out. If the application isn't there, then what a waste of time, because it has to drive conversation, because if it doesn't, like I go to Marcia's. I'm going to answer Marcia's question again. Is that the reason I didn't apply it was like because nobody else was talking to me about it. Like it was a conversation between me and one individual and a PDF, and then a conversation I was expected to have in my head on a regular basis. Not even my boss at the time didn't talk to me about it. Like that would seemingly be the most interesting thing, but it's like go back to what Ken was saying. Like it wasn't a KPI. It wasn't measured. No one cared about it because it wasn't my end of year review or my bonus wasn't predicated on making sure we have that conversation. It's like, well, okay, well, we did it, and we'll just all move on and just keep HR happy.
Okay, so here's a question for you, because when I was listening to this podcast yesterday, and you'll ask me who this person was, I don't know, they were Scandinavian. But basically one thing they said is that you should never give the feedback on the psychometric test if you're not trained on how to use that psychometric test.
Ooh.
So is that a money spinner for the organization?
Yes.
And they're kind of protecting? Is it does it have some validity in terms of, you really have to understand it? And I think, what did they say? They said if you're kind of using this pseudo science or like pseudo psychology of giving people feedback and you're not really trained on it, it's basically just your judgment. So is that why organizations don't embed it more, because they don't want to train people on it, or they don't have people trained on it, and it's just seen as kind of a tick box exercise? Discuss.
Well, they are designed to make money.
And there's nothing wrong with making money.
No. Businesses are generally there to make money, so I'm not like that's what you're designing it to make money. And to Danny's point, and welcome, Danny. You've not appeared in chat before, so welcome to our live stream. I feel like I have to do the right ring the new viewer gong. Remind me. So between now and the next live stream, I'm buying a gong. Welcome, Danny. But what
and
he
you're
was
not
saying
expensing it.
I can't expense the gong.
Anyway,
Okay, this is a non-live stream conversation. But there are so many of them, so there is a market for it. There's an appeal, right? There is so many. There are businesses that want to buy it. There are practitioners that want to accredit themselves against it. So there is that market, and I suppose it's just that it's like a bit matchmaking. It's like, well, which one appeals to that business or that practitioner the most for them to get qualified in? I do wonder how many I could get certified in, which I'm hoping I could expense. I could get certified in, and then what would that mean for the validity of me using any individual one if I was aligning to 10 of them rather than just one?
Couldn't make a informed comment on that. Could make something up.
But to go back to your point, is right. They are designed the businesses of psychometric and personality profiling are there to make money. That might not be why it was originally set up. There may have been a broader purpose there, but essentially the mechanics of accreditation, reaccreditation, subscription, recurring revenue are all designed very nicely to make an organization a lot of money. So, or not a lot if it isn't a very good one. So, but I go back to, we don't look at change over time. So you said you've done 3 in the past 2 years and you've changed each time.
Mm.
But like I've never been in an organization where we've reassessed ourselves again against the same framework and then looked at the change in that. But also, doesn't the change in your personality differ in different situations and different environments, and therefore it's so, you change so quickly and so in such a nuanced way that actually to measure behavior change over time against a psychometric test, a personality profiling test, whatever you want to call it, over time is almost impossible to do.
Yeah, yes, maybe. So one, I'm going to come to what Danny said a while ago. Sorry, Danny, for the delay in getting back to you. The 5-factor model is not about types; it's about being on a dimension, and those kind of ones where you're on a scale. Particularly not like Myers-Briggs where it's a either or scale, but if you're on a kind of a how much are you like this scale, how much are you neurotic, how much are you conscientious, etc. Um, if you're not then creating arbitrary lines saying, oh, as soon as you cross over from 50% to 51%, you then become a different type, then I think it's relatively okay to answer. I also think there's something in the setup. Like, yes, it can be influenced by a little bit how you're feeling, but I think as you not as much as you might think, as long as you're answering it in the same frame. I think partly why I've had differences if I've answered it like as a freelancer and I've answered it with, like last night I took it and I was thinking about myself overall, not just myself at work. And I think that made, and I gave some very, very contradicting answers. Um, so I think that's definitely an element as too. But I also haven't found, but I wonder if there's any evidence to suggest that these work for certain types of people more than others. For example, like neurodivergent people, like you're used to constantly masking, for example, does that mean that you come out very differently in a personality test, or is it still an accurate representation of how you are?
That's very interesting. So I was speaking to someone who is a practitioner of a certain tool, which I'm not going to say who or what the tool was, but essentially 80% of the people that completed it were the same. So,
Mm.
so that led me to believe that kind of validates a little bit what you're saying. Is that now, is that right? Are just 80% of the people in the general population, the same against this psychometric framework?
Also, availability bias, is it like you can't, unless it's part of hiring, it's very hard to physically force someone to take it. Is it just that the people who take surveys are self-selecting and they are a personality type and that they'll take surveys?
Sorry, I'm just baffled that Daddy's just said it takes 7 years to get accreditation for something in South Africa, which is crazy. You may
Well,
as
he's
well go and become a psychologist, right? for that level of investment, you may as well just go become a psychologist and make your own. But yeah, like the fact it can take 2 days, because you're reducing the whole. We know some psychologists, right? Organizational psychologists apply, their qualification to the world of work and do a fucking good job of it. Can you get up to that level in 2 days?
No, of course you can't. That's just like you're just scratching the surface. And then maybe you become dangerous. Like a little bit of knowledge is dangerous.
Yeah,
Because you think you know, right? You suddenly, then what is it? Johari's window, like you don't know what you don't know, right? And suddenly you've uncovered and you've learned stuff, but you don't know everything that you don't know. That also links into what is it? Dunning-Kruger. Like people always, if they know less, they tend to overestimate how much they know or how good they are. Whereas if people are generally better or know more, then they tend to underestimate themselves. That's a well known phenomenon.
interesting. Can I take you to the world of TV?
You could try. I'm not
Because
sure how interesting this will be for anybody.
I know I'll take you. I'm just going to readjust how I'm sat before I really try and explain this story to you. So the world of television. You've got a television. You know what it is. Cool. We've got there. Now, for those who are joining us for the first time, a lot of my references from my life come from pop culture and media, and most of Emily's don't. So when me and Emily try and have a conversation about the world, we come from two very different angles. This is why we work well together, because we are two opposites of a free form of shaped coin. Have you, every time
Have I seen a film? Probably not.
have you seen Westworld?
No.
Do you know the concept of
No.
Westworld? So Westworld is a Wild West theme park, but it is a open. What do they call it in the video game world? What's like Grand Theft Auto? It's like a free. It's a sandbox. It's a big sandbox essentially, and
Okay.
essentially this whole theme park is just like the Wild West. It's like you go back to the Wild West. It's real desert. It's real buildings, real sand, all this kind of stuff. And then it's populated by robots. But the
Mhm.
robots they look exactly like humans. You can literally do whatever you want. You can kill them, you can sleep with them, you can do whatever you want. They interact as people, and they are indistinguishable
That sounds
to
very
that point.
unethical.
Oh wait, you wait till you wait till you hear even more unethicalness. So I think it was at the end of season 2, it transpired that the reason they
Spoilers.
built this theme park. Oh yeah, if you've not seen it, tune out now. The reason that they had built this theme park was to assess and evaluate human behavior. So the robots were watching how humans behaved in certain situations, how they reacted to certain things, and were documenting it. And I think they did this for a period of like 15 years. And then the end of season 2 is like, oh, and by the way, there are 12 types of people. All this research that we've done for this theme park, there are 12 types of people. And if you're in these situations, you're going to react one of 12 ways. And then the humans were like, no, it can't be. We're so old and unique and individual. And the robots were like, no, you're not. you're one of 12. And I like that model because it's validated in like human behavior. Humans who didn't know they were being assessed on how they act and behave in
Mhm.
situations. So the data there would have been really robust. Now, I'm not suggesting that we go and build it, although I think we should, as just a use case. But like, it's kind of interesting, though. That approach for me in understanding how people interact and behave with the world has way more validity than academic psychology.
It's much more expensive and impractical to observe and measure, though.
I don't care. I'm in the world where.
No, you got to think of the real world application, right? Come back to real world application. Sending out a survey to people, yeah, it might not be the best, but it's cheap. Especially with like the rise of AI, you
Not
can
if you're
send out
spending 7
surveys.
years to get accredited in
No,
it.
okay, but not you. Like it's relatively cheap. It's much cheaper than studying people for 15 years, which I assume is not what you're suggesting, really, for 15 years. But like for whatever period of time you decide, it's definitely cheaper to do a survey. Of course it is, and get some results back and then have a conversation afterwards. So it comes back to what are you trying to get out of it? Like there could be a time where you decide it's actually really worthwhile observing people in like usability studies and things, like observing how people engage with products and things. Normally these are done for customers though. Your employees could be your customers, we could come to that, but that's not really going to tell you anything about their personality. That's telling you about their behavior and how they use a certain product.
And then this is where I get to my ideal solution is you do
Okay.
both and you look at the correlations between them. That for me is exciting.
Yeah, it would be exciting, but I'm still just going to maintain that it's practical and it's inexpensive. It's impractical and expensive, even.
Well, it's
And
expensive if
Danny's
you
saying
have
you've still got bias introduced in the analysis stage.
well quite. But let's remove the bias out for a second.
Oh yeah, easy,
because
gone.
because in Westworld it's just robots, but humans prime the robots and they'll have inherent human bias built into them and all this kind of stuff, and we'll end up in a bias whirlwind that we'll never be able to get out of. But I do agree with you, Danny. Is that the technology that customers interact with on all platforms for a company gives a really good overview of what your customer base is doing, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they're doing. And then you can add a survey in there as well to help add into that. But generally in the customer world, I think we're getting to a point where surveys are less. I think there's still a lot of companies that do, right? Like smack the happy face on the way out the door type vibe. Like cool. What's that doing? I just play with it. It's like I'm going to close my eyes and press a random button.
Validating your existence again. It's an indicator. It's not an absolute measure. It's an indicator. The happy face one.
Well, and I think in all of this, like none of these are potentially then absolute measures. They are all indicators, whether it's behavioral data or data from a psychometric test. It's all an indicator, right? But I'd like a world where we do both. Anyway, so the point I was making, that customer facing technology, social media platforms, any interaction, you can analyze that human behavior. Even if we just look at a very basic mechanic, email, open rate, click through rate, dwell time, 3 metrics you get out of an email if you're in a customer facing team. Every internal comms team I have ever worked with, and I've asked for those 3 metrics about their emails they're sending to their employees, they go, "Oh, we don't measure that." Cool. So you're banging out loads of emails and you don't know how impactful they are. Like, how do you measure how
Okay.
effective you are? Like,
Okay, so when you're measuring these kind of things, like, yeah, you want to be taking inspiration from customer experience. And we've been saying that like since day one, since before day one. This has been the whole thing of freeformers. But I think we're moving slightly away from psychometric testing here, and we're just talking about general understanding how people are thinking and feeling, which is not the same as personality tests, and it's not the same as aptitude tests either.
no, I don't think we're going to have time to cover aptitude tests, by the way. I think we're probably going to
That's
have to do that
fine.
in a separate one.
We don't
But
have to. I don't think it's that interesting.
but I think but this is where my own dissatisfaction with any data collection, whether it be a psychometric test or behavioral data, is the lack of action as a result, right? That like, if you're going to do any of this, it has to change. You have to do something with it. Otherwise, it is utterly pointless. So how do you make one that would be usable?
Well, I've never made one, so I can't answer that question. How would you implement one though? I think it's coming back to, well, first of all, check from your register and go for an approved one. And as Danny said, the comment has just come through, which I'm pretty sure you said it ages ago, about how not all psychometric tests and psychometricians, which is a great word,
I
are
love that word.
created equally. Um, I think it's coming down to what are you trying to do? Like, is it a tick box exercise, literally? Is it an HR team trying to say, oh, we should do this because we should do this? I did this in my last place. It's good. Or the CEO saying, I want to know more about this, so we should do it. Like, what's the actual reason why? I mean, that's just, I feel like I say this every flipping week, but like, what are you trying to achieve? What do you want to do? And then work out the best mechanic you can find to do that.
It's literally the question you ask me every single time I send you anything to look at. It's like, what are you trying to achieve here? So much so that you're thinking in the 2 years that we've been working together that I'd have learned just to answer that question up front, but I still haven't. Danny's point is interesting, right? Is like there is a study that proposed that a model that could look at Twitter comments and identify specific personality facets accurately, but are we really ourselves online?
Are
I would
we really
also argue,
does it work?
exactly right. Again, another pop culture reference, but you must have heard of Severance, Emily. Surely.
Oh, I have watched half an episode. And I've watched I've watched no half an episode, and I've watched the very last like 10 minutes of the final of season 1.
You consume media in the most
No,
baffling
no,
way.
no, no. Pete watches it. I don't. When I go downstairs, I'm like, what the hell is this? What is on the TV? Anyway,
Danny just went, how do you make one? And that's why there's over 1,300 on the market, because
well, how do you make a good one? I think you should have specified. But yes, come back to Severance.
But yeah, and this is ultimately the nuance of human behavior, right? Someone has put a lot of laughing emojis on the screen. Is that you are different people in different situations, whether you like it or not. You are different people in situations. When you fill out a survey, when you go to work, when you go home with your wife, with your children, with your husband, with your partner, with your parents, with whoever. Like, we are chameleons. So we are chameleons. We interact different ways, and so that conversation itself is super inspiring. Lots of different thought about, like, well, when. So to your point, regardless of the academic rigor of it, like, when and how do you deploy it? Like, do you send it in an evening and expect everyone to do it at 5 p.m. on a Friday? Because if you got it to 9 a.m. on a Monday, you'd probably get different results.
Also, when do you do it? Like, a lot of people do more of the aptitude, less of the personality, but sometimes personality tests get included in the recruitment process, which I think is very iffy and opening yourself up to all sorts of like legal things, but I'm not an expert, so I can't say. But oh, these comments are so distracting. But great, so please keep writing them. What was I saying?
You were saying about them
Oh
being
yeah,
used in
recruitment. And then there's a are you saying what you think the person wants to hear rather than what's actually true? Like, are you trying to game it? Are you trying to do the right answers? There was an Ask Me Anything on Reddit from like someone who does loads of these, and basically all of the questions were, how do I game it? How do I give the right answers? Um, and then to come back to this podcast I was listening to, the guy was like, why would you want to fill in the wrong one in a recruitment? Why would you want to get a job that maybe you're not directly suited for? He's like, the only reason I can think is if you're desperate for a job. And I was just like, I know this was 2019 and the market was doing much better, but like, are you for real? So many people are so desperate for a job and will do anything, say anything that they think will either increase their chances in recruitment of getting a job or increase their chances of promotion or just not land them in trouble. So
recruitment.
people do game these. And I think that's another thing as well. And I know we talk about engagement surveys a lot. And I know we talked about this like when we did that podcast with PX Hub as well, People Experience Hub. And they're like, oh no, they are anonymous. They really are anonymous, but people don't think they are. And then therefore answers are always going to be skewed because people have this inherent fear that their answers will be used against them.
Or, but yeah, I think from a user perspective, fear of they're going to be used against them, but also from my perspective and what I've seen in the world of working HR teams is like fear that actually everyone just looks at them and kind of goes, "Oh, cool," and then does nothing to change as a result. So I think where we're getting back to here is like the methodology that we always champion, right? Is if you apply human-centered design to product and service design thinking to your employee base, you would probably procure and then deploy psychometric tests in a completely different way. You consider it, right? And I think that's where the nuance is lost in most of these, is that they are just focused on the gathering of data and synthesizing that data back to an individual and thinking that that is enough, and it isn't. And I suppose, having now had this therapeutic session with you, my biggest bugbear is they're not designed right. Not from the academic rigor, but actually from a product standpoint, that most of them are not designed correctly.
They're not user friendly as well. Like that, yeah, they're not user friendly and they're not used within a situation that makes sense. I think it's the same with anything, any of these kind of like any initiative needs to be embedded, right? We talked about this way back in the first one. We talked about DE&I. They need to be embedded throughout. If you're going to embrace psychometric testing, go back to Telefonica O2. Like you need to embed it within and use it in a certain way and have those continued conversations going forward for it to be worthwhile.
Then it probably does become quite expensive.
Yep. And that's why you make your own one, right? But you don't have that kind of thing in house, and it comes back to all the problems.
Well, I think if we get Danny, Ken, and Marcy together with us five, let's just make one. I
I don't want to make
genuinely,
one.
no, genuinely, I reckon if you got the five of us in a room for a day, we could probably have a pretty good crack at making one, and it would probably get into the top 10% of it would be the
Okay.
top 10% of the ones we think are any good because we made it, so of course we think it'd be any good. But we could probably have a stab at one. I think. I just think of just looking at the people who'd be in that room. The three people I mentioned and ourselves is like there's a quite an interesting mix of people there that I think would make one. So there you go. If anybody wants to come to London one day, and we'll all meet in London, and we'll all try and design one hackathon type approach. We're not going to make a business out of it, but let's just see if we can design one and see if it'd be better than some of the ones we've seen. How about that?
I
Oh
mean,
no, sorry, go on.
okay. I was going to say I don't know if I need to. Can I take this seriously? Like,
No, here's a better idea. We take a current one and try and make it better. Therefore, we don't
okay,
have to make one from scratch. So
okay.
let's take one that we've all done and kind of go, how would we make this better? Because even now I've got ideas, and if we collaborate with some of the people who talk, like who are in chat, like that would be great. Marcy is in. Marcy says I agree, and Ken is in. Danny is being now uncharacteristically quiet, having talked a lot. So Danny probably doesn't want to do it with us, which is fine. It's not for everyone. Being in a room with me, locked in. But I think that would be interesting. But I also, and I imagine this will probably be another topic, but I look at that and, like you say, if I think back to the work we were doing together 6 years ago in digital transformation, it kind of has the same thing. Like, you're putting tools and pieces of software and platforms in organizations, and they were really struggling with adoption. And it's almost the same kind of thing, is that it's an adoption issue, right?
So what you're saying is you need to have a kind of influencers type model
No,
or
I genuinely wasn't going to the
MBTI test.
genuinely wasn't going to the answer, but I think it proliferates itself across a number of things: psychometric tests, employee benefits portals, new technology in organizations. All of these things get dropped in, expecting to change the attitude, the behavior, the mindset of the organization, and very rarely does any of that actually happen, because it takes a considered effort to get people actually to use it. And that's usually where the product design completely drops off. If I put it in, someone will use it. L&D initiatives is another good
Oh
one.
my goodness, yeah.
Oh, we built a training course and no one came. Great. Well, because no one actually wants it, or maybe the training course isn't good. Maybe it's great.
Or maybe we didn't tell anybody it was there. That's the other thing.
But this is it, right? So there's this real gap in design that makes these things don't work. And there's no one really in an organization looking after that. Well, unless you use our methodology, but there's nothing at the end of that process, because if it's recruitment, if it's L&D, if it's benefits and compensation, they all put things in the organization and kind of go, well, I've done it now, people will adopt it, people use it, and actually usage is low, the impact is pretty low, because it's just been a matter of, I think someone said it earlier, was tick boxing. It's like, and I think you said it as well, Emily, right? It's just sometimes you just put these things in because it feels like the right thing to do and to tick a box. And if you're at that stage, you may as well give up, because you're not caring about the impact.
It does speak to a lack of
Danny is in. Sorry to interrupt you. Danny has just said he's in. There's a slight delay in comments, but good. There's 5 of us redesigning the psychometric. Now we just need to pick one. But go on.
So, no, let me go back to what you just said. My last point, I think it really speaks to a lack of skill, permission / a box in which to operate, parameters in which to operate, and mindset from HR. A lot of the time it's no, you're a very admin focused. I'm not saying they are, I'm just saying this is a perception. Admin focused role, like you need to just go and sort out the day-to-day and do payroll and just sort out all the grievances, and like that's all you do. Whereas it really speaks to that kind of strategic and treating initiatives as products. Like you said, that it's product design. Absolutely. And with that comes not only product design, but also that sales, that marketing, so that communication, and also, I mean, customer success as well, right? Like checking that people are actually using it and being on hand to provide the support needed to engage, whatever it is. Obviously, maybe limited support needed for psychometric tests. Who knows? Some people can't click buttons. But some other ones, like L&D, for example, massive loads more needed. So I think it's a shame, but I also think there's a lot of opportunity.
Well, and there is the light at the end of the tunnel, that there is that it's achievable. And I think, taking some inspiration from customer design, there are tools out there and things, the way customer experience design teams are doing stuff that HR people teams simply aren't doing. And even if you just transpose some of the very basic stuff from 5-10 years ago from customer experiences teams, you're probably going to have an incremental gain in your performance as a department. And with that, we should end this live stream, because we're topping out at about 50 minutes here, and I think we commit that we're not going to speak at sometimes our audience for far too long. So this is just to say, Ken, Danny, Marcia, and the other viewers who have been listening or watching and haven't commented, thank you again for joining us this week. Next week's live stream is called... He clicks around his computer trying to find something about human-centered design, which is apt. Can you remember what it's called, Emily? Because I can't.
Oh, you could have given me a heads up.
I think I gave us both a heads up by publishing it on Monday. It's called "You're Not Designing for Learners: Why Human-Centered Learning is a Dead End." And I know our good friend Greg Arthur from Two Circles Design Studio will be on that one, because it's a hot potato in his world. So I hope Greg joins us. But for everyone who joined us this week, please join us again next week. It's great having the chat with you all. Thank you for helping us with the conversation, and we'll speak to you all.